is the former National President of NUPENG.
To the walk at Los Sharon, there can be no power. Where is the organized labor? As the title of this conference, the collapse of democracy in Rivers State. Where is the organized labor? Permit me to stand on the existing protocol and read this press conference to you and the world. Good afternoon, my comrades and gentlemen of the press. You have been invited here by the leadership of the former Labour Leaders Forum Rivers State to address you on our position on the undemocratic rule in Rivers State. Ordinarily, as the former Labour leaders were not supposed to lead workers to protest the collapse of democracy in Rivers State, rather than the organized labor that is saddled with the responsibility of defending and protecting nascent democracy, which is yet to see reasons the state that we found ourselves. Tomorrow, 18th April, will be exactly 1 month when the President Bola Tinubu, in the most undesirable and absurd pronouncement, Rivers State crisis, declared a state of emergency. The suspension, the democratically elected governor of Rivers State, Sir Nala Ifubra, his deputy, Professor Ngozi Odo, and members of the State House of Assembly for 6 months. To cap it all, the President appointed Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas retired the sole administrator of the state, in which we considered a brazen and flagrant discretion of democracy and the rule of law in our dear country, Nigeria. Furthermore, democratic and legally obligatory prerequisites were also thrown overboard by the National Assembly through their voice vote. This is for the first time in the history of our country in such an issue that have to do with emergency. You're talking about 2/3 majority, but the Assembly through their voice vote endorsed President Tinubu's state of emergency declaration in place of the constitutional prescribed 2/3 majority in Rivers State. Gentlemen of the press, as far as the former Labour Leaders Forum is concerned, such mindless takeover and destroying of fundamental principles of democracy in such an absorbed manner in Rivers State amount to the suspension of democracy and the Constitution of Nigeria, and inviting military dictatorship, which the appointed sole administrator has begun to accomplish. Of course, you will agree with me that appointing a sole administrator to take over the affairs of the democratically elected governor in Rivers State amounts to like the issue of the 1985 down into when we had military dictatorship in government, coups after coup. And what has happened here in Rivers State can be assumed to be like a military coup, or will I say a democratic coup existing, or military coup existing in a democratic institution. And that is the kind of situation we find ourselves today in Rivers State. May God help us. The sole administrator, Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas, acting out of a script by dismounting existing democratic structures in the state arbitrarily appointing sole administrators for the local government council, dissolving and reconstituting boards, commissions, and governing councils is a sinister agenda of a state captured that may likely, for we as the former Labour Leaders Forum believe in, that may likely befall all other states as the case may be. It is therefore our strongest opinion as the former Labour leaders in Rivers State to call on the organized labor, the NLC, the TUC, at the state and national level to actively join hands with the well-meaning Nigerians, civil societies, organized civil societies, and other good people of Rivers State to bring to an immediate end this disastrous, undemocratic precedent that has been unleashed in our dear state. We foresee danger. So therefore, we need to call on Labour to quickly join forces to see how we nip these issues on board as quickly as possible to avoid a danger that may consume us as a people. Organized labor, especially in Rivers State, as a major stakeholder, the social, political, and democratic and economic emancipation of Rivers people should not be sleeping while the state apparently is on fire. The selective application of states of emergency in Rivers State while ignoring the states that are constantly plugged by war security challenges and the country is undoubtedly questionable. The forum is absolutely at loss to apprehend low the political crisis and upheaval in Rivers State that has warranted such extreme measures taken against the people of Rivers State. It is very glaring that this decision is taken in bad faith against the good people of Rivers State and Nigeria. On a very good standing, we can boldly say that Nigeria, as a sovereign nation, cannot stand or succeed without Rivers State. The former Labour Leaders Forum in Rivers State therefore called on President Ahmed Tinubu to reconsider his actions and recall Sas Milana Efomara, his deputy Professor Ngozi Odo, and members of the State House of Assembly in the interest of peace and democracy. Let me reiterate that this forum stands in strong solidarity with all well-meaning people of Rivers State to navigate through these challenging times and deeply emphasize with the people, the frustration they are passing through, deeply sympathize with the people and the frustration that they are passing through as a Rivers people. Gentlemen of the press, you will agree with us that the emergency rule in Rivers State underscores the severe difficulties being faced daily by the sustainability of livelihoods in Rivers State. In conclusion, this address will once again call on the NLC to live up to its mandate, the Nigerian workers and the masses, or immediately put the towel, because we cannot continue to see the NLC that is the voice of the common man, that stands for equity, fairness, and justice, to fold our hands for 1 month now. Nothing has been said in order to move this issue and nip it to the bud before it gets out of hand. If NLC is not ready to pursue this democracy that we're enjoying today and to sustain it, they should be ready to put in their towel and leave the office. Sincerely speaking, as the president of NUPENG and the former president of NUPENG, we sacrificed so much the struggle of 1999 Jewish production in protecting democracy in this country. We paid the sacrifice. Our leaders died. Most of our labor leaders died in the course of fighting for democracy to be sustained. And there is nowhere in the world that you will find these absurd principles of democracy where an elected governor, without due processes, and elected assembly members, without due processes, will be suspended abruptly, meaning that democracy itself in Nigeria has been suspended, the Constitution of Nigeria has been suspended, and we cannot allow to ourselves or fold our hands and continue to see where these kind of challenges will be befalling us. Our prayer is that the labor unions, organized labor unions, will wake up and begin to ask themselves questions. Where is Nigeria heading to? We have a lot of crises on our hand economically. We must not allow this to elude us, this little freedom of democracy that we're just enjoying, to go down the drain. Gentlemen of the press, thanks for your rapt attention as we charge you to continually remain the apolitical watchdogs of the Nigerian society. Thank you and God bless you. We can entertain questions.
But I want to find out from you, sir. If state of emergency was not declared, can you suggest what ought to have been done instead of declaration of state of emergency? From the point of the Supreme Court ruling, and when the lawmakers refused to accept the budget, and when the impeachment was the next step, order of arrest of heads of institutions like INEC or CAPC. At that point, I want you to tell us, tell the world, what ought to have been done instead of state declaration of state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We just said three. Another two.
Yes,
before the chairman will come. Please, let me take it from in Robinson.
Thank you. My name is Robinson. I report for NTA. Your brief was very, very interesting, so to say, because the largest extent in society may have been waiting for the actions from the organized labor. But my question is this. You said if...
You didn't introduce yourself.
I did. My name is
Robinson.
Okay. NTA.
And I report for NTA.
Okay.
If the organized labor, particularly in Rivers State, refuses to take action, what would you do? As the former labor leaders, what would you do? And secondly, I want to ask, have you made an internal move to reach your colleagues, because I call them your colleagues, and suggest to them what to do before coming to the public? Those are my questions.
Thank you. I think in labor we believe in gender positive.
Yeah.
Gender. The women journalists don't talk. Please, this guy will say, Comrade, let me recognize you. Your hand will be open. Are you okay? Are you okay? Okay. Can say something there.
My name is David Senior Nacho. I write for Bangladesh. Just for clarity's sake, you mentioned that. In fact, let me put it, the NLC has not been proactive. Organized labor has not been proactive. Now I want to find out so that I don't say when we write and we say it's not. This is what we are saying. You see the national labor unions you are talking about, or you are talking to those in the state that the state is happening to. You are calling on the national body, organized labor national affair.
Thank you. The chairman now respond.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for the last question. Of course, you will agree with me as a saying that charity begins at home. And of course, those who bear the shoe today, as long as this emergency rule is consigned, those who are carrying the pains are the Nigerian workers in Rivers State. Then we have the NLC and the state that we expect up to this moment would have also taken some actions. Of course, we are aware that they made a press statement, and the press statement made is without an action. And the Nigerian citizens are watching with keen interest. The international communities are also watching with a very keen interest. Let me say that the call is for both the national and the state. It is very important, it should be clear, that this call is for both the national and the state. No matter what name they may call it, it is a wake-up call for the organized labor. The issues, as long as I was a former national trustee of NLC, and I know what I'm saying today. I was in the forefront of the June 12 struggle. I knew the sacrifices we made. We were declared dead or alive. We were there. We fought through it. My name is Achese Igwe, and I paid the ultimate sacrifice. And we're saying it today, globally, internationally. That is why the NLC is a member of the International Labour Organization and a member of various Liberty, UCI centers and various labor federations as long as the world is concerned. And as a labor organization in Nigeria, we fought through when there was a crisis even in Cuba. NLC moved to Cuba. I was among the delegation that goes there to fight the issues of sanctions by the Americans against the Cubans. And we knew what we did. We knew the sacrifice made. The truth remains that the final arbiter that talks against wrong policies, against mismanagement of our constitution is the organized labor. Because there's a saying that what affects the nose affects the eye. And so there is no way labor will say the issues that is happening, an emergency rule at this level. It is not an issue of lives who are being taken, or people who are being killed, or people who are being kidnapped. It is unfortunate that we're navigating through this kind of challenges today again in Nigeria. Let me take you back into memory lane. That in Anambra State, His Excellency Sir Ngige was the governor of Anambra State, and there was a period he was kidnapped right inside government house. Right inside the government house, he was kidnapped. If not for the people who shouted, at the point even his security aides attached to him were taken away by the then president of this country, or aided by the president of this country, Obasanjo. And I knew what Nigerians did, even in Anambra there. People volunteered to become security to His Excellency. They fought until the governor was restored back to the democratic rules of governance in that state. Rivers State cannot be exceptional. I mean, it can never be exceptional that a governor that is elected without due processes, with just ordinary voice vote, will be suspended, or an administrator will be appointed to run the affairs of democratic institution. We are not in military era where a sole administrator should be appointed to run the affairs. And that is why here in Rivers State, you will agree with me that even when the former chairman of councils were removed, which of course, unfortunately, I was one, the governor did not appoint sole administrators because the constitution at that point, by the virtue of the rulings of the Supreme Court, judgment that was passed, that no sole administrator should be appointed, even at the local government council, did not do it. Are we in military administration? Are we in the government of dictatorship? Then we'll begin to experience what we're experiencing today in Rivers State, what we're experiencing today in Nigeria, in part of Nigeria. There was no emergency rule declared in some part of the north where Boko Haram and terrorists have taken siege and are collecting tax in some of these northern countries. No emergency declaration was made. Governors were not suspended. Rather, military personnel were directed to go in and see how they can, sustain and maintain security in those areas. On the issues of what will the former labor leaders do if NLC refuse to take an action? Of course, my prayer and my fear is what is leading us to this press conference today. You are very much aware that people have started taking to the street, demonstrating, protesting. Here and there, women are on the street today. We shouldn't wait until the thing gets out of hand. And that's why it is important that labor, which is an organized institution, can come in at this point and take charge to avert unforeseen wildcat protests in Nigeria. And that's what we're saying here, and that's what we're calling. We pray we shouldn't get into that situation. Now, my friend from this day said, if a state of emergency was not instituted in Rivers State, what should have been done? Of course, you will agree with me that in the wild address of His Excellency, he mentioned issues of instituting reconciliating processes in reconciling and so on. Why was those processes not carried out before you declare state of emergency? There is no gainsaying that this is the president of this country that has all it takes. Has he exhausted his processes of dialogue? Has he gotten any report from any quarter that he sent forth to come into Rivers State and mediate in these issues? And the report came back to him to say, these are our findings. This is what we think should be. Does it depend on an individual report? I'm happy to announce to the world today, as you come here to cover this press conference, that Rivers State is peaceful. And that has been alluded and confirmed by the so-called military dictator in the state that has said the state is peaceful, the state is calm. We shouldn't, for God's sake, play with the current situation we find ourselves in Rivers State. It may befall any other state. God forbid. God forbid. And so, when you say what should have been done, what should have been done before the state of emergency should be a reconciliatory process by His Excellency. Has he at his own time invited His Excellency and the so-called assembly people for a meeting for discussion and reconciliation? The answer is no. Of course, in the heat of the crisis between the Minister of State and the governor, he invited them to Abuja in the early period. And after that, was there further processes, the issues of the assembly being out of the Supreme Court judgment, even when the process was being instituted to say, look, we are presenting budget, the governor went to present budget, it was locked out. In which country will that state of anarchy occur? And the president of the country would not call for a reconciliation, going through the process of the constitution to say, I did. The answer is no. My dear comrades and members of the fourth estate of the realm and the world that is listening here today, is that we must go through the process of dialogues as long as this country is concerned, as long as the international world is concerned. Dialogue is the key that brings the principles of democracy. That is part of the principle of democracy. When that principles of democracy that has to do with dialogue, reconciliation fails, as the case is in Rivers State, democracy has failed. The case is in Rivers State. It means to me as a person that the constitution of this country has been put on suspension. So we cannot fold our hands and watch that to happen. What will be the fate of our children yet unborn? God forbid. And this is where we find ourselves today. We should all pray. We should all pray for Nigeria. We should all pray for Nigeria. Thank you. The next batch of questions. Yeah, I've answered them.
I work with Arise in this platform. Two questions I'm rolling into one, Chairman. One, the House of Reps just constituted a 21-man committee to oversee what is happening there. You don't think that is your position today, that is your group, is rather trying to usurp what that team is expected to do? That is one. Then two, what would you have to say to those who would say you're putting these former labor colleagues together because you were the beneficiary of the last order as a former chairman of the board?
Thank you very much. Let me first and foremost express this concern. Of course, you will agree with me. I'm a Nigerian. That's number one thing you must take. Number two, I'm a citizen of Rivers State. The issue of whether or whether is not important to me. I still remain an activist. That you cannot take away from me. Even at the point of being where I am, I continue to talk and fight and go against policies that are negative as long as the principle of democracy is concerned. So the issue is not whether I was or I wasn't. As long as Nigeria is concerned, we're all beneficiaries of the democratic dividends that is existing today. And when that principle fails, the consequence of that principle affects all of us. And that is why I'm standing here today by the grace of God. The second aspect of your question of the 21-man committee that is being constituted, I'll tell you of a truth, that this would have been done earlier. This is the committee that would have come before you talk about the issues of state of emergency, or you talk about the principles of what can be done to navigate and mitigate in the crisis situation that Rivers State is facing. I want to believe that, well, there is a saying in my place that is better than never. I want to believe that this 21-man committee that has been constituted should come with a clean heart in trying to make sure that democracy is restored back in Rivers State. That is the key fundamental thing here. We are not against any other thing. I don't know who among all of us who are seated here will become a governor of his own states or a local government chairman or member of the House of Assembly. I don't know who. Because of course you will agree with me, some of the personnel there today, and some of them are journalists. Some of them are lawyers and the rest of them in their various fields. But the most important thing here is that democracy, which we all fought for, because of the June 12 cancellation of Abiola's election that we stood for and fought for. We did not just fight because it was just Abiola. We fought because it is Nigeria. We fought because democracy must come to stay. We declared actions upon actions against the military in Nigeria. There was nothing like whether I was a former governor or I was a former assembly member that did not rise up to fight injustice as long as Nigeria is concerned. And that is where we are. In the case of Rivers State, we must know that this is purely dismantling of the democratic processes and principles that we stood and fought for, that lives were sacrificed. Let me emphasize this clearly. His Excellency, the Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, was in the forefront of the June 12 struggle. And I knew how we had series of talks in the course of this struggle to see that democracy is restored back. My stand and the stand of Nigerians in the course of that is that Abiola must be declared the winner of the June 12 election. Lo and behold, today he is being immortalized as the winner of the June 12 election that we've all fought for. We all came out to vote. Rivers people voted in their mass for the governor of Rivers State, for the assembly members. There is no gainsaying. Democracy has to do with reconciliation and peace. And so we don't believe this act of dictatorship, the democratic setting. Even in the American, where the issues of tariff drive was being declared by the president of US, he was being called to order. He decided to go back to his chef again to say 90 days grace again here and there, because dialogue must be the key. So we cannot afford to watch our dear nascent democracy that we're enjoying at this point, that we're praying God Almighty to sustain for us, and that we advance from strength to strength. We'll begin to see a break in that dream. God forbid. And that's why we're also appealing to His Excellency that he should not allow some individuals around him to truncate his principle and will that I know of him, and that democracy must be restored back in Rivers State. The elected governor, the elected assembly members must be asked to resume back their office roles. And the process of dialogue and reconciliation should be instituted to address the issues, if there are, so that Rivers State and Nigeria will move forward.